This needs to go up on Moodle, and I'm sorry, not on Moodle, on YouTube. I'll put that up there. I also, as an aside, received a note yesterday from my department chair and from the VPAA requesting that I take attendance. Now, I'm not a big fan of attendance because I think you guys are responsible for joining a class. You guys are responsible for watching videos, doing well on the exam on your own. But I was asked to take attendance because there's a considerable number of students in classes all across the college that when there's class in person, they choose not to go. They take the online route. And I think there are reasons as to why that is. I think there are some legitimate concerns as to why people are going online. But we were asked not to allow. I mean, you are absent if there's an in-class person and you're not there, that's considered an absence. And I'm not going to adhere to that. Okay, I just want you to know that if you're online or you're in class, I'm going to consider it present. I'm also was asked not to do videos and have them for later, mainly because students that don't show up to class can just watch the video and take it that way. And I think the videos benefit you and benefit me. So I'm going to continue doing things the way that I do them, but I just want you to know in the meantime, I am going to start taking attendance, either in class or in person. I'm sorry, in class or virtually on Zoom. So I just want to put that out there that note has come down from on high at the administration, and they really want us to take attendance. So I just want you to be aware, all right? Okay, that said, let's start the sessions. Let's start the lectures. This should be pretty familiar. I mean, at this point, you guys know what's happened, and you know what we've done. You know, you know what we've covered. So I assume that this will be pretty straightforward. But again, I like to have this just so that we can go over it one more time. All right, where is it? There it is. So we'll do quality tools really quickly. We went over a lot of these already. I'm going to move this out of the way. Move this up here. Okay, so you guys can see the screen if you can already. Quality tools, we said there are lots of them. The goal of quality tools is to improve the process, improve the quality of a product, a good or a service or an idea. There are two problem-solving approaches we've talked about in the past. This is PDCA was one of them, plan, do, check, and act. It's kind of a short way of trying to improve something. The second one, define, measure, analyze, improve, and control, is how we do Six Sigma. So it's a much longer process. We evaluate lots of different components. We measure a lot of different variables, and we try to figure out what makes the most sense. So define is to define the problem. Measure is to measure the process. What's the flow time? What's the cycle time? How many products are we making? How many quality defects do we have, etc. Analyze is to analyze the data and see what's good, what's not, and how should we fix something. Improve is to identify the part of the process to improve. Control is to maintain that improvement and see if it actually does improve the process, does improve the quality. So it's a much more formalized, straightforward process on how do we improve something. So just know that going in, that this is, PDCA is a very, very informal way of looking at improving a process, where DMAIC, DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve, and control, is a much more formalized way, a much longer way. So DMAIC is Six Sigma. So an example would be if I were to take marshmallows and improve the marshmallow part of the s'mores making process. Well, what's the problem? It's only the marshmallow. It's not the graham cracker or the chocolate. It's not the person. It's just, we're going to look just at the marshmallow cooking part. Measure would be how long does it take? So 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 2.5 minutes. Analyze is if I look at 100 different marshmallows being cooked, what's the condition? What's the color of the marshmallow? What does it look like? How does it work? How does it cook? How does it taste? Improve is I'm going to do 2 or 3 marshmallows at a time and see how effective that becomes. So do I have more defects at once? Do I not? What does that look like? And then finally, control. Control is looking at my control that I have and holding on to that, maintaining that part of the process. Did it work? Did it not work? So it's a much more formalized way of looking at quality. So we talked about variable data or attribute data or continuous data and discrete data. So variable is that continuous. It could be lots of, so example, speed, length, weight, temperature, density. It's numbers. Attribute data is colors, yes, no, no go, go, good, bad, pass, fail. It's yes or no. It's one or the other. It's more discrete data. So there's individual specific numbers that we have, right? Or numbers or colors or attributes, right? So variable data versus attribute, and then quality improvement tools. We've talked about a lot of these. Here are my histograms. We mentioned histograms are just looking at observations. So every time I look at 100 different containers of, I don't know, ice cream, or 100 different containers of soda, something like that, how much is actually in the container? And so I measure 20 ounces versus 21 ounces versus 19 ounces versus 18 ounces. And hopefully I can use statistics by doing a normal curve. It's a normal distribution or a bell-shaped curve, right? Histograms, usually on a first pass, just looking at it, you can identify what's right and what's wrong. The blue chart of the top is right because it's normal shaped or bell curve shaped. The one on the bottom left in the red is not right. But not only can you tell whether it's right or not, you can also look to see, okay, what do I need to do? So the one that's blue looks like it's about right as far as 2.5 liters per ice cream tub, where on the bottom left looks like it's actually at 2.2 liters per ice cream tub. That's where the most observations are. So what do we need to do? We need to add more ice cream. How many? About 0.3 of a liter, and have that. So you just kind of look at that and know from observation just by looking at the shape of the curve of the histogram. Cause and effect diagrams, we talked about the 4 M's, so manpower, machines, methods, and materials. We're looking to find brainstorming for looking for causes. If we want to fix something, how do we do it? We circle the likely causes, and that tells us this is what we should work on. So a fishbone diagram is another term for it. We used this example before in class. We talked about quality of the cafeteria food, right? So how do we get quality of the cafeteria food to improve at Saga? Manpower would be, are the people well trained? Are they friendly? Do they know what they're doing? Can they create or cook a variety of dishes? Machines would be the ovens that they use, the refrigerators that they use, the tables that they use, etc. So everything that is a resource that can be reused in making food at the cafeteria. And what are some challenges we have? Is it not clean? Does it not cool enough? Does it not cook enough? Is it not in long enough? And that could be manpower too. Like the chef isn't cooking the chicken long enough. Methods is a standard process in how you make grilled cheese. Right, so if I make a grilled cheese sandwich, do I put bacon in it? Do I not put bacon in it? Do I put lettuce in it after it's cooked? Do I use butter? Do I use mayonnaise? What is the process? What is the method? And then finally, materials is the quality of the good, the inputs that are being used to make the output. So the quality of the bread, the quality of the cheese, the quality of the chicken, the quality of whatever. And all of those, we can start looking at brainstorming ideas for what might work and what might not work. And so we get these ideas to helpfully, and we circle the ones that are the ideas where we think we actually might need, this might be a weakness, we need to improve this. And so this is our cause and effect diagram. Pareto analysis is an 80-20 rule. We take all of our problems, we rate them from the most consistent or the most problematic to the least, so the most number of complaints to the least number of complaints, and then we focus on the top 20%, because that gets rid of, it's a starting point to help us get rid of some of the challenges. So we talked about movie theaters. What are the top 15 complaints of movie theaters, or the top 15 complaints of Franklin College? And then how do we address those top 80% of complaints? So the first 2 out of 10, the first 3 out of 10, first 3 out of 15, right? So if we address those, then we kind of can eliminate 1, the most amount of complaints, and 2, it gives us a starting point on how to fix problems or issues at Franklin College. So that's great. Right, so that's the Pareto rule. So that's what we have here. So another one we went through is checklists. Checklist was just a list of something. So if you're going to move into an apartment, or you're going to take a certain class, you have a list of requirements for each class, or you have a list of requirements for where I'm going to move to. Does it have parking? Does it have, how close is it to school? How close is it to having fun and going to social places, like going out to restaurants? How close is it to a laundromat, because I might need to wash my clothes? How close is it to neighbors? How close is it easy to walk on the streets? What are the utilities? What's the heat like? Is it electric or is it gas? What's the cookware like? Does it come furnished? And all these are questions, and we just, if it's a yes, we check it. If no, then we don't. That's another way of doing quality. Finally, we talked about process control charts, and this is probably the biggest one. Again, I'm going to take out the statistics so you don't have to worry about them, but we said that in the middle, in this picture, middle is the mean, or the center line, the average. And then 1 standard deviation, or 1 sigma, 2 sigma, and 3 sigma go in either direction from there. And this picture shows zones. So between 2 sigma and 3 sigma is zone A. Between 2 sigma and 1 sigma is zone B. Between 1 sigma and the center line is zone C. And what we're going to do is, as we start going from left to right, every observation we find, much like histograms, we're going to measure. And if it's out of process or out of control, then we're going to stop the machines and start figure out how to fix the problem. So if I were to have, come on, here we go. If I were to have data points that went across, every data point is every minute in time, I could stop the process depending where it would fall. So we talked about M&Ms. If I had 55 M&Ms in a package of a small package, the average would be 55. That's that line. But then if we went up the standard deviation was 3 M&Ms, then the next line would be 58, and the next one would be 61, and the next one would be 64. And going down, it would be 55, and 52, and 49, and 46. And the point is that as we start marking every data point, or every bag of M&Ms we look in, then is it out of process? Does it get out of alignment? And here are the rules, very quickly. If a single point is outside of the upper or lower spec limit, which is beyond 3 standard deviations, then it's out of process. We stop the control. This bag has 71 M&Ms. There's something wrong. I don't know what's going on, but it's not 55. On the other side, if it's 3 points that are consecutive points outside of 2 standard deviations, so this would be the zone B or zone C or wherever, then that would be a problem. So if you look at this chart right here, that's on the screen, there's automatically 1 point that is automatically outside of 3 standard deviations. It's the one at the very top, right? So that's wrong. We got to stop the process. Similarly, there are 2 points that are, well, there could be 2 points or 3 points that are beyond the 2nd standard deviation line, which is the orange one. So anything that's above or beyond that, we're going to say 3 points for our exam. Then you need to stop the process. There could also be 5 points that are beyond 1 standard deviation or more. And so that would stop the process. So that's beyond the line that's adjacent to the average. And then finally, if I have 8 or more points that are consecutive on one side of the average, the center line, then we need to stop the process. And because if you continue to make variations, you're going to have more failures. More failures is costing money. So here's our rubric. If a data point is outside the upper limit or 3 standard deviations on either upper or lower, then stop the process. If it's 3 or more beyond 2 standard deviations, stop the process. If there's 5 or more beyond 1 standard deviation, stop the process. If there are 8 or more out on one side of the average, stop the process, because it should be more average than that. Traditionally here in this class, I will talk about the probability of the next point being off, or we'll talk about how do you measure what the standard deviation is? How do you calculate that? And I'm just not going to do that right now. So this is the part that I'm going to have exempt from the exam. So just understand that this is the rubric on how we would stop our standard deviation, or stop our process. If it doesn't miss any of these, then it's in control. We continue to run the process. We continue to fill gallons of ice cream. We continue to make bags of M&Ms. We continue to fill bottles of soda, whatever it is. So that's our process control chart. All right, so let me stop share there. You guys probably remember that. Quality, we said there were different types of quality. Let me put that slide up. There we go. Okay. So there's different forms of quality that we could go through. Some pictures, but the big ones here were product quality or design quality doesn't meet the needs of the customer. Conformance quality doesn't meet the specification provided by the supplier or the manufacturer. Here were others: perceived quality, how people perceive your quality. Performance quality is much like design quality. Does it perform the way it's supposed to? Reliability is the idea, is it something that can be reused over and over again? A service that can be reused over and over again. Aesthetics is the prettiness of it. Support what's the post-purchase support, and is it good or bad? Durability is how easily can it be broken? So if it's misused or mishandled or falls or drops, does it break easily? Features are the different features that something has, the different add-ons. And conformance, again, does it meet the specifications provided by the supplier, by your company? Right. Everyone is responsible for quality. And we talked about the 4 different costs of quality. Prevention costs were design costs. Poka-yoke to make something idiot-proof or error-proof, right? Foolproof so that there's not an issue. Prevention costs are the cheapest type of costs of quality because it prevents people from making mistakes, prevents machines from making mistakes. Then we went to appraisal costs, which is training and staff and tools. It's training people to observe something and see whether something's right or not. That's the appraisal cost. Internal failure cost is observing that at the end of the process when something is made, I can test it. I can either observe it and see if it looks right, or I can plug it in or type it up or try it out and see if it works. So we talked about light bulbs. Does the light bulb I screw it into a lamp at the end of the process, does it work? And I kind of get that feel. And we talked about lot testing versus 100% testing versus individual testing. Lot testing being that we're going to just measure a few in a lot. So 3 out of 1,000. And if those all 3 of those work, then we assume that all 1,000 work. Versus, or date code testing, those of a certain date code, so a certain week of the month. Yes, these all seem to work for that week, so I'm going to assume that they all work for the week. As opposed to 100%, where I'm going to measure every single one. Okay, every single light bulb that comes through takes a lot of time and costs, but I'm going to measure it anyway. Okay. Finally, we have external failure costs. External failure costs are recalls. That's when it goes out of the factory and goes to the customer. And this is the most expensive cost of quality. So we have problems here with the external failure costs. Finally, PDCA is Plan, Do, Check, Act. PDCA, we talked about that just a little bit ago. It's an informal process as opposed to Six Sigma, which is a much more formalized process. DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And with Six Sigma, Sigma is the Greek character for standard deviations. So we talked about the better the process is, the more often we'll see observations toward the mean that we want. The better the process is, the more standard deviations we can fit between the mean and the lower or upper specifications. So at a weak process, we can only have 1 sigma or 2 sigma. And remember, a standard deviation is about a standard deviation in either direction. Positive and negative is about 65% of all my observations. So the more observations that we see around the mean, the tighter the process becomes. The more standard deviations we can fit between the mean and the lower or upper specification. And so we saw mathematically, this is what it looks like. But practically, we saw that 6 standard deviations is 3.4 or 4 failures per million products. So if I make 1 million light bulbs, only 4 of them will fail. And that's amazing. But to get there, it's really costly. Like, it takes a lot of manpower, it takes a lot of time and energy and training to get people a process that good. And if you look at 5 standard deviations, it's only 233 failures out of 1 million. That's still pretty good, but it depends on the product, depends on the service, right? So we mentioned that if it's a pacemaker, you don't want 4 failures. 4 failures isn't good enough, because if it goes inside someone's chest and it fails when they need it, that's problematic. So again, it depends on what you have. And when I tried doing this with this example of Six Sigma in class, for example, 5,000 incorrect surgical operations per week is 3 standard deviations. 1.7 incorrect surgical operations per week is 6 standard deviations, which is much better than 5,000. But if you're the 1 or the 2 incorrect a surgical operation, that's a problem, right? Because that's litigation. We worked on the wrong arm, the wrong knee, the wrong part of the body, or maybe it was a slip up, maybe it was some sort of miscalculation. A common problem that is often untalked about in surgery is that sometimes physicians or surgeons don't count all the cloth swabs that soak up blood when they finish their surgery. Periodically, they may leave one inside the patient. So that could be potentially problematic, right? 200,000 wrong drug prescriptions each year versus 68 wrong drug prescriptions each year. If you are the person taking the medication, that could be too much, right? 68 is too much. We need to get down to like a 7 standard deviations. But again, that costs money. So do you do that? So that is Six Sigma in a nutshell. And that is standard deviations in quality, improving quality. So cost of quality and things like that. Let me get to the next one. Process and change management. We talked about how everything is a process. Process thinking is looking at the organization from a perspective of being, Process thinking is looking at the organization. There's a series of processes. So here we go. Process and change management. So we look at a series of processes. We've learned that there's inputs, there's outputs, and there's the process. The process uses machines called resources, or people called resources, and resources can be reused, right? So we're transforming something in the process. And we said we can map the process. Operations is a circle, an arrow is transportation, a square is inspection, or sometimes it's a triangle, depends on which book you look at. A D or a half circle is a delay. Storage is a symbol. And so if I look at the process and I measure it out or I map it out, I'm looking for all my Ds. So toward the beginning of this process and the bottom part, the bottom chain of this process in the middle, there are these Ds or half circles. These are delays. If we roast marshmallows, but we have our chocolate and our graham crackers ready for s'mores, the roasting marshmallows causes a delay. The chocolate and graham crackers just sit there. Can we make it more real time? Can we make it more just in time? And that's part of the challenge. So you're looking for the bottlenecks, if you remember that term. And with each process is capacity. How many can I make? So in a time period of, say, an hour, how many s'mores can I make? How many marshmallows can I roast? How many sheep can I shear? And we're looking at our capacity. We also mentioned flow time and cycle time. Flow time is the time for the entire process to do one thing, or sorry, to do one product, one service. Cycle time is each individual step of the process. How long does that take? So if you add up all the cycle times, you'll get a flow time. We talked about the bottleneck, and the bottleneck being a literal bottleneck and a bottle. If I turn them upside down and I pour the contents out, right? So this, look for the process that's resource constrained. How do I improve that? And we did this with shearing sheep. So if I have so many sheep I can shear at each step of the process, your entire process is limited by the capacity of the weakest point with the least amount of sheep. So in this case, it would be step B. If I increase my resources from step B and I add it to, now it's up to 320 sheep, now my step C is the weakest because it's only 300. And the bottleneck moves every time you add a resource or you improve a technology. So there are two ways to combat the resource constraining problem or capacity constraints. We're talking about outputs, processes, and inputs. Metrics are measures, and we use this term Kaizen. Kaizen is looking at small improvements, and over time you'll have a large improvement in your process. So we just look for the small, tiny incremental improvements. Kaizen. You'll see this and you work in a facility that manufactures things or provides services. This term called Kaizen. We talked about this, analyzing, improving a process, which is if I look at every step, I can evaluate it as value added, or I can look at it as necessary but not value adding. So it's something that the customer needs or it's government regulations, doesn't add value to me, but it's needed regardless, right? So having somebody at the movie theater kiosk when you first come in, or the, not kiosk, the front desk, you know, what kind of movie would you like to see? Most people do it online. Most people do it through a kiosk where they don't need a person, but some people really want to have a person they can interact with. So it's necessary, but not really adding value, right? Something that I will do. Waste generating, something I definitely don't need to do because it just takes up time and resources. And then question mark is I'm not quite sure. I really don't know. An example would be go to the bookstore and get your books for class. Well, do a lot of people go to the bookstore? I don't know. Can I just say go on Amazon and buy this book? It's cheaper. I'm not sure what the best solution is. And so you can put a question mark there. If I were to map this process, value added are usually operations, so they'd all be circles. Necessary but not value adding could also be a circle. Question mark would be a question mark. Waste generating, get rid of it. So when you look at analyzing a process, these are the 4 steps. We've mentioned those in the past. And I think that's, the last thing is when you start to measure a process and improve it, do you do the process that exists, the process that should exist, processes people think it exists, or the process as it's written or documented? And you start with the red box, the process that exists. Why? Because there are benefits and disadvantages that people do that they don't know about or you don't know about. Like they're little things that maybe little ways of doing something that people have just learned over time. It makes it easier, or it makes it simpler, or it makes it more efficient. And we want to capture those. We want to measure those. So instead of looking at people's opinions or something that's already written that might be obsolete, we're going to look at the process as it exists, the red box. So that is the beginning of this. That's this section here. And then I want to get to the last one before I close out today. Hold on a sec. The longest part of going through slides is actually loading them up onto Zoom. So at the very end, remember this. What is a supply chain? We talked about a supply chain is a connection of different companies working together to provide a good or a service to the customer. It's involved in transforming raw materials and information into products and services, consuming the products and services by the consumer, and then finally disposing of the packaging, disposing of the product and service. So it's either consumed or the packaging is removed. Typically, it's a close working relationship between organizations to make stuff happen. We did a small brief example that there are supply chains can explode. There's just a lot of different companies working together to provide a product or service and to the final end user. And so it's confusing. We talked about the difference between goods and services. Goods are tangible and they can be inventoried. Services are intangible, they can't be inventoried. We talked about quality systems or quality of services are a lot harder because of the 4 I's. We talked about they can't be inventoried, they are inseparable, they are inconsistent, and they are intangible. So inseparable, that you can't separate the person from doing the service versus the service itself. And then the tangibility of it is you can't touch or physically hold a service, so it's harder to compare against another service. The inconsistency is one person could be really good, think the hair salon, think going to get your hair cut or your hair done, maybe they had a bad day and so they're not as good as they are today as they were last week. That inconsistency, even with the same person, it's not as good. And then of course inventory, it's not something I can just pull out. Services are used immediately as soon as the person walks into the building. Get your hair done, laundromat, or legal services, health services, whatever. It's something that's done at that moment or that hour or that time frame. It can't be held off until next week, right? So else you're rescheduling the service. So this is the 4 I's of quality of services. Again, there are 3 companies inside of the supply chain: purchasing, production, and distribution. We've talked about that. There are suppliers and customers tied to it. We talked about efficient versus effective supply chains. Efficient are ones that save money. Effective are ones that give the customer exactly what they want. And sometimes between saving money and giving the customer exactly what they want, they're at odds with each other, because giving the customer what they want means increasing the costs, right? And do you pass those costs off onto suppliers, to other customers, the end user? That's up to you. Right, so efficient versus effective supply chains, and there aren't many companies that do that. I think we mentioned Chick-fil-A, we mentioned Amazon. Still really hard to find companies that can do both. Right, Walmart's very efficient, and a place like Chick-fil-A is very effective. Right, so they can give the customer what they want, but it's still hard to find companies like that. The difference between operations and supply chains is operations is really a sign of a system of processes. It's the things that go on, right, to design, supply, produce, and deliver goods and services to customers. Supply chains include the people. And so the goal of a supply chain, either or, supply with people or without people, is to lower costs. Marketing and sales increase revenue, and we're trying to lower costs, improve our quality by doing so, enhancing people wanting our product because it's really good quality, because we're very good at meeting customer needs, aligning operations with the strategy, evolving customers' needs, technology. We talked about a pictorial graph of the supply chain, and that is we have tiers and echelons. Tiers go upstream, so they go to the left of this picture. Echelons go right, downstream. And where you are in the firm represents whether what tier or number or what echelon and what number that you are, the company is. So if we start at the firm, our supplier to the left of us, the light blue in this example, is our tier 1 supplier. The yellow box, the DC, the distribution center, is our echelon 1 customer. The green box is our echelon 2 customer. The purple or bluish dark purple, dark blue box at the far left would be our tier 3 supplier from the firm. If we were the tier 3 supplier at the far left of this picture, then the green customer would be an echelon 5. The DC box, the yellow box, would be an echelon 4, because we are 4 steps away. And why do we care about that? Because we often don't interact more outside of our tier 1 or our echelon 1 company. Right? So if changes happen elsewhere in the supply chain, we rarely know about it. We're still trying to figure out what change happened and how did this happen and what did we do, etc. And so it's important for us to periodically just to check our echelon 5, our echelon 4, our tier 2, tier 4, whatever, outside of our immediate zone of communication and say, hey, what's going on? What's changing? How can we help you? Etc. And we'll see some of that later when we talk about inventory. All right. Here we go. Upstream is tiers, downstream is echelons. Again, it's just the count from us. And then process thinking, this transformation inputs, transforming something into outputs. Same with services. So not just physical goods, but process thinking is transformation. And then the last thing to talk about, second to last thing, supply chain partners. We have customers, we have suppliers, and we have stakeholders. Stakeholders can be shareholders. They are community members. It's anyone who has an interest in the performance of the company. So it could be employees or stakeholders, could be customers or stakeholders, although customers are their own category. It could be other services that the company hires. All of these are stakeholders. And the last thing I want to go over is this thing, and I just didn't know where to put it, so I put it at the end of this chapter, is planning. When we look at the time frame for our planning, operational versus tactical versus strategic, strategic is long-term, so about 3 years out. Tactical is medium term, about 6 months out to about a year and a half, 2 years. Operational would be day to day. So this was a quiz question. About 2/3 of you got it right. Operational is what's happening today, what's happening tomorrow, what's happening on Monday. Tactical is what new products do we need to release to make money? Or what products are not working? How do we do a redesign of that product? Right? So it's somewhere in the short term, but not really that short of term. It's not next week. It's something just kind of thinking about how do we make more money? How do we change our position on this product or the service? And strategic is where do I put a new facility? What country do I move to? What country do I start interacting with and providing marketing and sales? Right? So it's a long-term perspective. If I build a new building, where am I going to put it? If I'm going to partner with a new company, it might take 2 to 3 years to start partnering with that company because of litigation, legal services, challenges. Maybe they're a competitor. So an example would be way back, 15 years now, Apple and Samsung, where Samsung had created the touchscreen technology and Apple said, well, we'll work with you to do it. And then we want proprietary rights of that. We want to be able to offer this touchscreen with you for at least 18 months. So it's our stuff until Apple found and created their own, right? So there was a connection or a combination between two rivals, but it took years to happen. So strategic planning is that long-term approach. Tactical, again, is midterm. Operational is day-to-day, very short-term. Now, I just went over a lot in a short period of time. I know we're out of time, but if you have any questions as you study this weekend, or if you watch this video, feel free to reach out and just say, hey, Professor, I don't quite understand this. Go through your quizzes. Well, your quizzes aren't open. Go through your notes. Go through the stuff we've had. This video will go up on YouTube in about an hour. So you can go through and take a look at that. Again, you have a week to do this. So if even when you're taking the exam, hey, Professor, I don't understand this, just send me an email. I'll try to explain things without giving away an answer. Finally, if you need extra time or you like to be away from people and the online environment doesn't do that for you, contact Katie Weiner and Academic Resource Center. They will allow you to take the exam in a confined space, in a spot where you don't get distractions. You can have extra time. But I figure the best way to do this is just to have it online for everybody. It may not be the way that you're used to doing it, but I figure it probably makes the most sense for people to have the flexibility to do it when they want and do it under 5 days. So if you have any questions, send me an email. That's all I've got for you today. Again, there's no math on the exam, and it'll be 27 short answer questions, multiple choice questions up front. Only do the first 2. I'm sorry, only do the first 25 or any 25. You can cross out the other 2 that you don't want. Same thing with essays. You'll have 2 essays. You have to fill out 1. I want at least about half a page. It can be longer. It can be shorter. But it shouldn't be shorter. It can be longer. But cross off 1. So all you want is 1 essay. And those directions will be in the exam. But I just want you to be prepared for what you're going to see. Right now, at this moment, are there any questions? You can unmute or chat. Okay. If there are no questions, you guys are free to go. I'll let you guys head out. Enjoy your weekend, and there's no class on Monday. So we'll get together on Wednesday. We'll continue on talking about purchasing, and then eventually logistics after that. And these start getting math heavy. So next Thursday or next Wednesday, probably next Wednesday, we'll do a video around 3:30 in the afternoon, 4 o'clock, and do that. And I'll put up the Zoom link for that. But we'll start doing the math problems pretty heavily starting exam 2. So take care, everyone. I'll see you next week. Good luck on your exam.